we had just began discussing the Treaty of Paris of 1783, which was intended to be the peace negotiations to end the conflict between the United States of America, which we can call it now, and Great Britain. So 3 American peace negotiators gathered in Paris, an aging but still astute, intelligent, with it, Benjamin Franklin, the rough, brash John Adams, and the impulsive John Jay of New York. All 3 of these men were very deeply suspicious of the old world, particularly the British leadership. So these envoys, Franklin, Adams, and Jay, had explicit instructions from Congress to make no separate peace and to consult with the French at all stages of negotiations. So it really puts France in a pretty painful position because France is always eager to smash Great Britain, to try to get after Great Britain. But at the same time, and they did want the United States to be independent, and but they did not want the United States to become a new world superpower, which they would have to contend with. So France is kind of, they're in an awkward position. So it becomes pretty. The negotiations at the Treaty of Paris become pretty intense. All right, but this is what happens as a result of the Treaty of Paris of 1783. First, Great Britain formally recognizes the independence of the United States of America. So it becomes 1,000% official, if it wasn't official before. Great Britain recognizes they're no longer the American colonies. They are the United States of America. In addition, Great Britain granted the new United States very generous boundaries. As you can see by this map, everyone knows the 13 original colonies here in this pale khaki color. But under the Treaty of Paris, all of this land that belonged to Great Britain was ceded to the United States as territorial land. This land is now like it becomes the Northwest Territory, but it's pretty valuable land, and it became part of the new United States of America. All right, so this pink portion was ceded to the United States by Great Britain in the Treaty of Paris of 1783 when we became a country. So now our fledgling nation more than doubles in size. More than doubles. Even though this is not organized territory, they're not states. These are not colonies. This is just territory. All right? It's not organized whatsoever. But it belongs officially to the United States. So now we stretch all the way west to this crooked line right here that is a major artery in our nation. What is this? What is this boundary? That is the Mississippi River. Okay? The northern boundary are these former glaciers, the Great Lakes. Obviously, the eastern boundary is the Atlantic Ocean, and the south is Spanish Florida, because Florida still belonged to Spain. It belonged as part of the Spanish Empire. All right, so we got a lot, didn't we? We get independence. We get a whole bunch of land. But the Americans also had to yield some very important concessions. What are we going to do with all those people that fought against us that still live here, those loyalists? What are we going to do with them? Well, one of the things that they said at the Treaty of Paris is that loyalists were not to be persecuted any further, because during the war, many loyalists had their belongings set on fire and their families, persecuted. Bad things happening to them. Okay, any land that was confiscated from the Loyalists was to be given back to them, but as it was before the war. The Treaty of Paris says that. As for the debts that were long owed to British creditors, the states vowed to put no lawful obstacles in the way of their collection, meaning we still had to pay all our debts to the British, even the colonial debt when we were colonies. Neither side is really happy about this treaty, but that's kind of what treaties are. They're compromises. You have to give up something to get something you want. So, why would Britain be so kind as to give such a large land grant to the United States? Okay, that's definitely part of it. They're done with it. They feel like it's not worth their trouble, their money. They're not, they can't get anything out of it anymore. So that's one reason. Another thing is Britain. They know that we have ties with what other European nation who helped us? France. They don't like that we have an alliance with France. They would rather us have an alliance with them. They're trying to seduce us from our French alliance. So they made the terms of the Treaty of Paris as alluring as possible. And so right off the bat, we have a division, a political division. Are there going to be citizens in America that say we should ally ourselves with France? Yep. Are there going to be citizens in America that say we should ally ourselves with the British? Right off the bat. Division. So you guys see the division in America today. It's not new. It was born as soon as we were born. Division and fighting and struggle and arguing and debate. That is as American as apple pie. Okay, so that's just kind of part of how our nation was born. We argue with one another. Okay, so questions on the Treaty of Paris? All right, now let me talk about the revolution itself. The revolution was not a revolution in the sense that it was a complete and total radical change. That's not what it was. I would call the revolution more of an accelerated evolution as opposed to a revolution. There were some striking changes that were ushered in that affected some social customs, political institutions, and ideas about society and government, and even gender roles in the Americas as a result of it. But we did have a weakening of the aristocratic class. What's aristocratic mean? Yeah, like the wealthy upper crust of society. The reason why we had a weakening of our aristocratic classes is because a lot of the loyalists left. They went back to England. They said, well, we lost. I lost my land. They probably won't give it back to me even though they're supposed to. I'm just going to go back to England because I got money. And with them, they took all of their culture and elegance and paved the way for a patriotic elites, and it brings about a more democratic way of life because more people can be involved with more ideas. Another change that happens, it is a revolution, and revolution means change. Another change that happens is that most states reduced property holding requirements for voting. So instead of it just being white men of a certain age who own land, it became white men of a certain age. So what does that do to the amount of people who can vote? What? I didn't quite catch that. It goes up. It increases it. Do we become more democratic? Does democracy increase? Yeah, that's what I mean. All right. So, yeah, democracy definitely increases as more people are able to voice their opinion. Now, we still got a long way to go. It's still just white men of a certain age. Still got a ways to go. The United States also parts ways with primogeniture. What is primogeniture? Primogeniture. It's one of the reasons why people left England in the first place. Good guess. It has to do with inheritance. Only the oldest son gets the inheritance. That's done away with. So, like, I'm sure like you guys don't know what primogeniture is because it doesn't exist in America anymore. At least amongst us, lower to middle class people. Upper class, they may still do it, but primogeniture is where the eldest son gets all the inheritance. That kind of becomes a thing of the past as more and more America becomes more democratized, and also there's a fight for the separation of church and state. Okay, now although the Congregational Church, Puritans, continued to be legally established in many of the New England states, the Anglican Church is kind of tainted and has a bad association. Why? What's the Anglican Church also known as? The Church of England. And who's in charge of the Church of England? The King of England. So the Anglican Church is kind of tainted by the association with the British Crown. So they were humbled, and they just kind of the Anglican Church in America almost entirely broke ranks with the Church of England and became what's known today as the Episcopal Church. You ever heard of the Episcopal Church? The Episcopalians? It's almost identical to the Church of England, only they no longer owe their allegiance to the king. Okay? So, the struggle for divorce between religion and government was most hardest fought in Virginia. It was prolonged all the way out to 1786, when Thomas Jefferson and his co-reformers and a few Baptists won a complete victory with the passage of the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom. The Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom. It was actually drafted in 1777, but does not go into effect until much, much later. It was written by Thomas Jefferson, and it's written for the state of Virginia. What's the government? Do you guys remember? What's the government of the colonies, or I'm sorry, the states from 1777 to 1789? What's our national government? The Articles of Confederation. And who has the power in the Articles of Confederation government? Not the federal government, but the state governments. Very good. So the state of Virginia, being the largest state, was a very powerful state. And anything that happens in Virginia was going to have great implications for the rest of the states. Okay? Just simply because it's the largest. Now, what the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom does is it disestablished the Church of England in Virginia. Meaning, the Church of England was no longer the official religion of Virginia. In fact, what becomes the official religion of Virginia? What's the whole idea here? We're going to separate church and state. Nothing! There will be no official religion of Virginia. Because what the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom does is it guarantees freedom of religion. You can do any religion you want. People of all faiths, even Catholics and Jews, as well as all members of all Protestant denominations, were welcome to practice their faith in Virginia. So, why am I talking? What's the big deal? Who cares? What's the big deal? Why is the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom important? It does. For what?
Religious freedom.
And which is established. Like, where do we get our religious freedom from? Who says that you have the freedom of religion right now? Where is that written? And what is the document of our government?
Constitution.
The Constitution. In fact, it's written in the First Amendment. You have the freedom of religion in two ways. Government cannot establish a religion and force you to go to a church that you don't want to, or maybe one that you do want to. Government can't force you to do that. Also, government cannot interfere with the free exercise of your own religion. The Establishment Clause and the Free Exercise Clause. Both of those are stolen from the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom, which was written by Thomas Jefferson. Okay? So these are like notable precursors to our First Amendment rights. This is not the First Amendment, but what does it eventually, contribute to? The First Amendment. Okay, our freedom of religion. Thomas Jefferson, so proud of this. On his gravestone, his epitaph, he only has 3 things written. Okay, he's got his name, and then he says, what do you think his 3 most proud accomplishments are? This is a guy who was president of the United States, by the way. The Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom.
Yeah.
Author of the Declaration of Independence.
President. No.
Founder of the University of Virginia. Those are his 3 most proudest accomplishments. Not being president. He's pretty proud of this, and it's written on his gravestone. If you go to Charlottesville, which is where he lived, you can see that. You guys know where Charlottesville is? It's not far. It's like, 3.5, 4-hour drive from here. Okay? So Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom, pretty important. Okay? All right. All right, so let's talk about this. All right, so the very first attempt at government by the 13 original states was the Articles of Confederation. It is a national government. It was adopted during the war, during the American Revolution, in 1777. Now, what the Articles of Confederation is it's, I would call it more of a firm league of friendship than an actual government with power. A firm league of friendship. Because what this document establishes is a system of cooperation among the independent states. It asks the states to cooperate together. And I've talked to you guys about how come we're called the United States, right? Right? Have I told you guys? Richard Henry Lee makes the proposal in June of 1776 that these colonies by right ought to be free and these united colonies should be free and independent states. What is a state? A state is a country, okay? Everywhere on planet Earth, a state is a country. That is why we are the United States, because under the Articles of Confederation, each colony became its own country. And this country, each country, was loosely joined together and were intended to cooperate with one another under the Articles of Confederation. A loose league of firm friendship. A firm league of friendship. Okay? Now, so that being said, each state could operate under and do their own thing. Each state printed their own money. Imagine having to exchange money every time you went to a different state. And each state's money had different value. Each state had their own different banks. Each state had different rules and laws. Each state could create different tariffs with different foreign nations and negotiated different deals with each nation. Each state could declare war on a foreign power. You see how there could be some problems that result as this, okay? And there's a reason why this is not around anymore. All right. Now, this is a national government, but it's not intended to be powerful at all. In fact, if we could sum up the power of the national government under the Articles of Confederation in one word, that one word would be Weak. It is an extremely weak government. Powers were very limited. Why on earth would they allow this? Did they do it on purpose? Yeah, they did. What government did our founding fathers just overthrow? A monarchy, a tyrant, a unitary system where government was held as a singular authority. They wanted the exact opposite of that. They wanted power to be held amongst different states and with no singular authority, with no authority over top of them. So the powers of the government, the powers of the Articles of Confederation were very weak and limited. So, for example, the Articles of Confederation were given some powers, okay? Like they could do a few things, but some notable weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation: they had no power to collect taxes. They could not collect taxes. Sounds great, doesn't it, as a citizen? Man, no federal taxes? That's wonderful. Well, it doesn't work out too great. Because they had the ability, right, like so, a government that cannot collect taxes, how do they get money? How do they operate? Okay, well, they had no power to regulate trade either. Where do they get money from? How was it, obviously, they were intended to be able to do some functions, like they were allowed to have an army and have a navy. They could do that, but they had no money. How were they intended to get money? They had to ask the states for it. Like, hey, Massachusetts, loan us some money. Or give us some money so we can have, do this stuff. Hey, Virginia, you're the wealthiest, most powerful. Give us some money. And so, hey, Mr. Poe.
How are we doing today?
Oh, fine as a frog hair split three ways. You got a treat for him?
I heard you like peanut butter.
You know I do.
You have been selected by the gods.
Oh, my goodness. Thank you so much. It's my lucky day.
No problem.
Appreciate that. So, the Articles of Confederation, they were so weak.
That was Jill's piece of Miss Soap.
Oh, yeah, well, we know who's going to win that one. So the Articles of Confederation, extremely weak government. They had no power to collect taxes, no power to regulate trade. They couldn't even enforce laws that they made because they had no executive branch. There was no president of the United States. So the way in which they got money to do things is they had to ask the states for it. How giving do you think the states were to the Articles of Confederation government? Probably not. In fact, they were not. They were not very giving to the federal government. So yeah, they could have an army and a navy. How large of an army and a navy do you think they are going to be able to create with no money? I don't know about you, but I don't want to, if I'm going to be a soldier, I want to get paid. And if I know that the government's not going to be able to pay me, I'm not going. I'm not signing up. So these are major, major weaknesses. No power to collect taxes, no regulating trade, no enforcing laws. They couldn't direct public policy. There was no national court system. So let's try to change. What happens if they want to change it? So, geez, this is horrible. We need to make some changes to this. Well, under the Articles of Confederation, what was required in order to change the Articles of Confederation? 13 out of 13. Unanimous. Well, you guys already know how Americans are. Do we agree on anything? No. And so right from the get-go, our country's really setting itself up for failure. Okay? So, and a lot of these weaknesses really get pointed out over time, as you'll see. But that being said, not all bad. Okay, they do a few things that are very good. Okay, One such thing that is very good is the land. They make some land laws, like the Land Ordinance of 1785. The Land Ordinance of 1785. What did we get from Great Britain in the Treaty of Paris of 1783? Land, and lots of it. We divided that land into territories, such as this one. This one's called the Northwest Territory, okay? All of it together is the Northwest Territory. Today, you can see that it's part of Minnesota and Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio, okay? So all of this is the Northwest Territory. Under the Land Ordinance of 1785, what the government of the United States is going to do is they're going to sell this land and make money from it, and hopefully then they can hire Army and Navy. Pretty good plan. That's a lot of land, okay? So they're going to use the proceeds to help not only support the government, but they're going to try to pay off their war debt. All right, all those debts that we still owed the British, that we still owed the French, that we still owed the Dutch. We had a lot of debt, and this was the plan in which they created to help pay some of that debt off. All right, now the plan to pay off the debt is not as important as the way that they organize this territory, because you see here they begin to survey the Northwest Territory into blocks, into squares. And each of these areas were to be divided into townships of six miles. It's 6 square miles, or 30, or 30. It's 36 square miles, or boxes of 6 by 6. So it's 36 sections. Each one is 1 square mile. 36 square miles. Now, it was cool how they did this, because the Land Ordinance required certain parts of these sections to be reserved for some things. All right? One of those such things was like public school. So one of these would be reserved for a school, meaning that everywhere in the Northwest Territory is going to have what? Education. Education. We cannot even say that about parts of the South, today. They still got to drive in some places, okay? It's very rural. Whereas in the Northwest Territory, education is built into it. It's built into it, and there's schools everywhere. Now, it's obviously changed today, but it's based on population. So the way in which the territory of the Northwest gets organized under the Land Ordinance of 1785 is very good, okay? Now, another thing that they do in the year 1787, this is all done by the Articles of Confederation, is the Northwest Ordinance of 1787. And this related to the governing of how the old Northwest came, because technically, what is the Northwest Territory? Is it a state? Do they have say in things? Do they have a representation in the Articles of Confederation government?
No.
Can they be taxed? I mean, we don't know. And so what the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 does deals with how we're going to turn these colonies. We're kind of treating them like colonies. How we're going to turn them into states. Okay? So, there would be two, all right, so once an area of the territory reached a certain population. So once they did all their surveying, this is kind of how they blocked it off. All right, you can kind of see here. I'm just looking at the map here. You can see Wisconsin and then Illinois. This was all done during those surveys during the Land Ordinance of 1785. And so those different areas in the Northwest Territory get created. Once areas reach a certain population, 60,000 people, Once 60,000 inhabitants populated that region, they could apply to Congress for statehood. They also had to create a constitution beforehand, a state constitution. And another thing the Northwest Ordinance does is it gives everyone freedom of religion and prohibits slavery. Slavery not allowed. And all the state constitutions had to reflect that. So the Continental Congress, the Articles of Confederation Congress was pretty wise in doing this. You know, if it had attempted to contain these new territories in permanent subordination and make them pay their taxes to the states or pay their taxes without representation, they'd have been no better than Great Britain themselves, because that's what the British did to us. And so, you know, almost immediately, a second American Revolution would have started between East and West. But the scheme worked so well, its basic principles, the principles that were contained in the Northwest Ordinance of 1787 and the Land Ordinance of 1785, continue on and really get included in the United States Constitution when it gets created. Okay? And we'll talk some more about that next time.